Would you open a business in Ukraine? Do you think peace is necessary for good business investment? Actually, for one company, war is the best business in the world, and I bet you've never heard of that company. Behind the Ukrainian conflict, there may be the biggest robbery in the history of mankind, about which no media dare to speak. Like, share, and leave a comment below so that more people can see this important video, and be sure to watch it to the end, because it concerns all of us. Many of you have written to me to comment on the events in Ukraine, about which so much has already been said that it seems there is nothing more to add. But few delve into the essence. And the essence is hidden far from the public eye. In the West, the conflict is seen as Russian aggression, Russia's attack without provocation, cause or precedent, a war that can only end with Ukrainian victory and Russian defeat. And that's why Western politicians say Ukraine must be supported financially, with weapons, to the last bullet, literally.
From the Danish side, we decided to donate our entire artillery.
Yes, all 58 rounds possessed by the Danish army. On the other hand, Russia views this conflict in a broader context than the escalation of 2022. They believe that the conflict actually began in 2014 with the coup in Kiev. But I would say that 2008 was a turning point. In Bucharest, Romania, a NATO summit was held at that time, where the following declaration was made.
NATO welcomes
George Bush, President of the United States.
Ukraine for their membership in NATO and offers them a clear path forward to meet that goal.
Ukraine's membership in NATO is a problem for Moscow, just as Soviet missiles in Cuba were a problem for Washington. In 1962, US President Kennedy imposed a blockade on the sovereign Caribbean island, and the world was closer to nuclear conflict than ever before. The Soviets then backed down and reached an agreement with the Americans. In geopolitics, there are spheres of interest. I'm not justifying it, I wish it weren't so, and that we all hold hands and sing about flowers and love, but a more realistic goal would be for the great powers to negotiate before conflict arises. There were certainly attempts to resolve the current conflict in Ukraine immediately after the entry of Russian troops. More precisely, an agreement was essentially reached in Istanbul, under which the conflict would end, and Ukraine would declare permanent military neutrality. But then, my namesake, the then Prime Minister of Great Britain, intervened.
З того, коли ми повернулися з Стамбулу, приїхав Борис Джонсон до Києва і сказав, що ми взагалі не будемо з ними нічого підписувати, і давайте будемо просто воювати.
This is a Ukrainian, and not just any Ukrainian. He is the chief negotiator of the Ukrainian side in Istanbul, the head of the parliamentary faction of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not Russian propaganda. Ukrainians say this themselves. The West wanted war, and did not allow Ukrainians to mess everything up with some peace agreement there. And then, the question arises, why? Prussian general and military theorist Karl von Clausewitz said that politics is the continuation of economics by other means, and war is the continuation of politics by other means. If this is true, the cause of all wars lies in economics. And that may sound counterintuitive. War is terrible for the economy, isn't it? People lose their homes, factories are destroyed. Nobody wants to invest in a war zone, right? It only seems that way on the surface. There is one company that invests huge sums of money in that country throughout the entire conflict in Ukraine. This is the American investment company BlackRock, the largest on the planet, with a value of an incredible $10 trillion. Not 10 billion, this is with 3 more zeros, meaning $10 million. That sum is equal to the GDP of all countries in the world, except America and China combined. If you've never heard of that company, it seems they've done a great job, because it's their goal to be invisible. And what does that have to do with Ukraine now?
We have already managed to attract attention and have cooperation with such giants of the international financial and investment world as BlackRock, JP Morgan, and Goldman Sachs.
What exactly is this cooperation about? First of all, it should be emphasized that the United States has already invested billions and billions into the war in Ukraine. In March 2022, they invested $113 billion, and then another $24 billion. And now President Biden is asking for another $60 billion for Ukraine. But are the funds really going to Ukraine? Of course not. Even the top American politicians admit it. Senator Mitch McConnell publicly admitted where the money goes.
The vast majority of it is going to American defense manufacturers.
So, you have an admission that this is all money laundering. And who owns all these defense manufacturers? BlackRock. But the real business starts only after the conflict ends, when the reconstruction of Ukraine begins. Zelensky has handed over exclusive rights to BlackRock for the reconstruction of Ukraine. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink made it very clear at the World Economic Forum in Davos that they are not philanthropists, but are there to make money. Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock.
And everybody from the private sector, from David's firm, from my firm, across the world, we believe that we can make a fair and just return. And I'm not talking about philanthropy. There's going to be a lot of philanthropy. I'm truly talking about if we can rebuild Ukraine. It could be a beacon to the rest of the world of the power of capitalism.
The founding father of neoliberalism, Milton Friedman, once said that only a crisis, real or perceived, produces real change. BlackRock saw a good opportunity in the Russo-Ukrainian conflict to achieve what it has been advocating for since the Maidan coup in Kiev. To better understand this, we need to go back just a few years. In 2017, a series of international conferences was initiated to strengthen the Ukrainian market economy, which implies reforming all segments of the Ukrainian state and society in favor of foreign investors and to the detriment of the working class. In short, it's a Washington consensus on steroids. This is one of the main reasons why Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych had to be ousted in 2014. He opposed the demands of the International Monetary Fund to reduce wages, abolish social benefits, and end gas subsidies for European integration. His turn to Russia was not a matter of emotions, but economically rational. But with his ousting, the West got a free hand to do whatever it wanted. Leaked documents have proven that Western countries, primarily the UK government, through its development arm, UK Aid and its embassy in Kiev, finance consultants to help the Ukrainian government sell Western reforms to the Ukrainian people, to rebrand harm to the people as a benefit. At the same time, Zelensky himself called on American investors to benefit by investing in Ukraine. Vladimir Zelensky, President of Ukraine.
We are giving you and your companies the opportunity to work together with us for the benefit of all us.
And then, all this talk about helping Ukraine sounds less like aid and more like an investment for future takeover of control over the entirety of Ukraine. Even the top American political brass admits that the money flowing to Ukraine is not a gift.
90% of the resources that we send over to Ukraine is guaranteed as a loan.
Does anyone really think that Ukraine can ever repay even a fraction of those funds to the United States? Of course not. There's no theoretical chance. But they can do something else, something familiar to us in the former Yugoslav countries. They can privatize everything valuable they have and hand it over to multinational corporations, as well as implement dramatic austerity measures, keeping Ukrainians as impoverished as possible so they can never compete with foreigners. In the TV series Servant of the People, Vladimir Zelensky portrayed the fictional president Goloborodko, and here's what that character had to say to the IMF delegation when they demanded catastrophic measures from Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky, get lost, and that condition is mandatory. Was I clear? We're beggars. We're not Gastabita. I want you to remember once and for all, we're not a country between orcs and elves. We're a normal, strong, beautiful and rich country. And just because we're having a hard time now, doesn't mean you should exploit us.
Красивая и богатая страна. И то, что сейчас мы лежим на лопатках, не повод ставить нас раком.
The real Zelensky accepted all IMF demands in 2020. He abolished the moratorium from 2001 that prevented foreigners from buying Ukrainian land, which was the biggest obstacle to unbridled privatization. The World Bank hailed this decision as a historic event. Why? Because agricultural land is the most valuable asset Ukraine possesses. A quarter of the world's black soil, incredibly fertile land, is located in Ukraine. And before the conflict, Ukraine was the world's largest producer of sunflower, flour, oil, and seeds, as well as among the largest exporters of corn and wheat. Ukraine literally has the capacity to feed the world, and the plunder has already begun. About 30% has been sold. The buyers are American companies, Cargill, DuPont, and Monsanto. Who owns all these companies? BlackRock. To sum up, Ukrainians are receiving money from the West to fight against the Russians. But that money, in fact, doesn't go to Ukrainians, but to American defense contractors. And Ukrainians aren't receiving that money as a gift. They're borrowing it and will have to pay it back, and they won't be able to, because the amount is enormous, so they'll have to sell the country to BlackRock and a few of the largest Western corporations. So, they're paying America to fight for American interests and the honor of becoming American slaves. What a contrast to what Ukrainians chose in the elections.
Идите вы в жопу.
Don't believe everything you see on television. Perhaps now it's a bit clearer why it was so important for the West to escalate the war in Ukraine, why a peace agreement wasn't considered, and why it's crucial for all of this to drag on as long as possible. The media play a role in diverting attention from the true patterns of conflict, but even they don't have unlimited power to shape public opinion. Western audiences are tired of the Ukraine story. They've had enough of money being drained from their budgets, and every new aid package to Ukraine is met with increasing difficulty. At some point, Washington will say, okay, they've fought enough, let's build Ukraine now. And they'll pay us by letting us own everything we find and everything we build, similar to other countries where Americans have meddled. But never before has the plunder been so large and complete as in Ukraine, and that's truly sad. No one asked Ukrainians if they wanted this. Elections have been abolished. They don't have a say anymore. Only BlackRock has a say, because business is business.